Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. The Rouse of Abernathy, written by no good ID names. From For Girls Are Film Songs of the Stars and Glory, Volume 6. The Galoon Confederacy is slow to trust. The enslavement at the hands of the Tulare-mongerers, that Empire's destruction, and their renewed enslavement at the hands of the conquerors has played a major part. Their betrayal by the major allies of the Fourth Great Struggle, and the carving of its territories that followed are factors as well. There are far too many reasons to go into depth on the subject, but suffice to say, while the Golian themselves are noble and gracious people, their race has a long memory, and remains reserved when it comes to alliances and negotiations. Of course, there is an exception to every rule. The Galoon Confederacy has only once in recent history approached a race with the proposal of alliance, one that has since grown into a fierce and lasting friendship. The deeds and triumph of the Galoo and Terrans go hand in hand, laying that foundation for the greater Galactic League and the Age of Peace that we enjoy today. As to what inspired this unprecedented proposal, we must look back 600 years, Galooan's desperate war with the Plectara, and an act of valor that pierced their infamous reticence, the work of Staff Sergeant James Richard Abernathy of the Battle of Chaff. Better beings than myself have gone into depth on the background and details of the Battle of Chaff. See Lodorah's The Reaping Fury, Goldpool's The Blood-Soaked Field, but I'll do my best to provide a brief overview. In the 38th cycle of the war, while the main fronts in 4th and 7th Sector held on bitterly against overwhelming Plectaran assault, legendary commander Rockfellet Gulnar discovered a weakness in the Plectarans' defense line on 5th Sector. Knowing full well that swift, decisive action would be the key to victory, he assembled the greatest force that he could muster to strike at the weakened defenses, that his greater fleet could break through and flank the Plectaran offensive. The cornerstone of his strategy rested upon seizing the battery of Genahon 7, captured by the Plectara early in the war. Great swaths of their once fertile planet had been converted into military platforms. Any ship of the line that might hope to cross the Plectaran territory would be subjected to the combined fire of 4 million long-drive plasma cannons at any one time. To admit the fleet's safe passage, the guns of Genahon would have to be silenced. Gulnar's armies landed by dropship on the planet's surface and marched on the central artillery command base on the far side. At dawn, they met the hastily assembled armies of the Plectara defense on a wide plain of the Celadon grain at the Battle of the Chaff. The Galoon were outnumbered and exhausted from their long march, but as the Plectaran weaponry battered their shield emplacements, their commanders began to rouse. The Galoon race placed a great importance in poetry and oration in their culture, compounded by their natural psychic abilities. In war, Galoon officers are trained to deliver rouses to raise morale before a battle. Their lengthy battle speeches are layered with subtle telepathic undertones that can mold cowering recruits into hardened, zealous warriors. It is no understatement to say that the rouse is the greatest military strength of the Galoon. To properly rouse is as much an art as it is a science. It requires charisma, force of personality, a fundamental insight into the minds of the audience. Rousing has been described as the binding of individual egos into one unwavering will. But there is no agreement as to how exactly it is accomplished. There are as many styles of rousing as there are speakers. Analogy and metaphor are commonplace, and many quote and incorporate famous rousers of legend to bolster their own. The rousers of Genahon 7 are memorized by the Galoon children in every scroll across their domain. Each general stood before their army and roused for more than an hour. Thrice swept Gokun of the Falling Leaves lectured on the moral imperative of their mission and the role of violent action in peaceful society. Blinded Gold Tenon of the Ocean Foam led a call and return rouse, drawing on no less than 3 famous epic rouses of his family line to cement his soldiers' will. Low-fainted Galkana of the West Sunrise played the fall tune with his tentacles and recited a poem tying the Plectara to the darkness at the end of the world of Galoon myth. Tied implicitly to each rouse was a telepathic impulse, the sure knowledge that the battle fought that day would decide the fate of the Galoon race. To say that these rouses were successful would be an insult to the majesty of the art. When the shield dropped, the Galoon armies charged on the Plectara with a fury not seen since the earliest records of the Galoo. When their guns ran dry, they drew their golden prith blades and redoubled their assault. When their blades chipped and shattered, they cast them aside and met the Plectara with their bare hands. Fist met pincer, mandible locked against tentacle. And on the fields of Genahan, in the shadow of the great gun batteries, their insect foes learned what it was to fear. Such is the power of the Galoon rouse. But these rouses, legendary as they are themselves overshadowed. Another speech was given at the Battle of the Chaff, one whose mystery caused the Galoons to question everything they knew about the art. An enigma delivered by an alien, the Rouse of Abernathy. Staff Sergeant Abernathy and his men had been saved 3 weeks prior to the battle by the Galoons. The Terrans were not a significant military power at the time, but traded extensively with the Buthwan, a Galoon ally, and provided troops to protect their shipments. Abernathy's commanding officer was escorting such a cargo ship when a warp drive malfunction dropped his ship into the middle of enemy territory. The Terrans held out for 2 months on a barren moon against the Plectaran attack, cut off from any hope of rescue. When his captain died, Abernathy took command of the remaining troops and continued to dig in. Only in this miraculous arrival of the Galoon attack fleet spared the Terrans from the bloody, drawn-out last stand. Upon rescue, Abernathy attached himself to the offensive in gratitude. There was some doubt as to what a small force of such an untested race could hope to accomplish. But in the end, Rockfell Galdar decided to give them the benefit of the doubt. Abernathy was described as a reserved man, hardened by combat but not inclined towards conversation. His low rank, inexperience with command, and the period of intense fighting that he had seen led to a casual familiarity among his soldiers, and an air of irreverence that the Galoon commanders found unsettling. His men obeyed him without question. Still, these qualities are ill-suited for a rouser, and when it came time for the battle was met, most doubted that he would speak at all. So eager was the Galoons to document their rousers by video drone and microphone that none was spared for Abernathy's speech. The hubris of it still stings them to this day. He used no amplifiers to address his troops. There is no record of what was spoken, but we know that his rouse took less than a minute, and we know that when the battle commenced, the Terran company fought as fiercely and bravely as any Galoon elite force, spearheading a charge into the Plectaran main bunker, breaking the back of the enemy's defense, arguably turning the tide of the war itself. They used no rules of warfare recognized by the Galoon Confederacy, killed 3 times their number, and sustained 85% casualties by the action's end. It was not until the Ganahan's battery was finally silenced and the last pockets of Plectaran resistance subdued that the Galoons realized the magnitude of Abernathy's accomplishment. Rousers are, as a rule, widely varied, and can accomplish proper group might by uncountable approaches. But no rouse worth mentioning has ever taken less than half an hour to complete. Galoon shields are specifically designed to last long enough for a proper rouse to be done. And yet this Terran roused his men with no Galoon training and no apparent psychic ability. In a tiny fraction of the time, there are no rousers less than a minute long. Abernathy roused regardless. This is a great mystery of the Chaff. To the Galoons, discovering the secret of the Terrans was not a military pursuit, although their military would be revolutionized by it. It was not an artistic pursuit, although their arts would flourish and blossom from it. To a race so centered on the art of address, unveiling this mystery was a spiriting pursuit. It spurred a race scarred by betrayal to place their faith in alien race by the words of a single Terran soldier. We may never know what was said. Abernathy himself died less than an hour into the battle, shot over a dozen times by the Blectaran fire. Such was the strength of his rouse that his men fought on, their resolve even stronger than before. When Rockfeld Galnar himself asked one of the surviving Terrans what Abernathy had said, her weary reply only strengthened the mystery. What we had to. Private Calic tugged her rifle tighter to her chest and looked up the shield emplacement. A wall of blue light, over 30 meters tall. Rainbow light washed across it as the bugs did their best to knock it out with lasers and plasma and whatever they could throw. The ragged Terran company was almost swallowed up by the Galuan forces on either side. At the head of each battalion or so, a Galuan officer was floating on suspenders, giving them a speech or something. On the left, the officer was shouting something, and his men all shouted back. On the right, their officer was playing a harp or something. She was still a long way from fluent in the language, but they seemed to be getting pretty riled up. Well, it seemed like a good time for the Terrans to get their own speech. She craned to catch a glimpse of the Sarge. He appeared to be eating a sandwich. Abernathy paused, suddenly aware of the expectant eyes upon him. He turned and looked up at the Galuan generals, deep into their intricate rhetoric, and turned back towards the soldiers under his charge. He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Bad guys," he said, mumbling through peanut butter, and swallowed. He shrugged. "Fuck 'em up." End of story.
I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.